Okay, so let's get started. So good afternoon and thanks for joining us today for your Accelerate Your Business at Lunch HR workshop. So this session is brought to you by the Accelerate Business Recovery Virtual Hub, sponsored by Desjardins Insurance and partially funded by Employment Ontario, the Ontario government, and the Canadian government. I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker today, Jody Ziegelstein-Yip. So Jody is a 24-year vet. Sorry, let me start that again. Jody is a 24-year leader and veteran in the HR community and is the Chief HR Innovator and founder of Enliven HR Consulting. Jody plays a major role in her clients' businesses by delivering innovative, sustainable, and strategic HR programs and solutions designed to unleash leadership potential, drive performance, increase organizational effectiveness, and steer business results. Jody engages small, medium, and large local, national, and multinational clients in a variety of industries. Jody's experience comes from both working with clients for more than half her career, as well as in the human resources in the corporate world, where she has worked for various organizations. And Jody, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right. So for those of you who are coming for the first time, welcome. For those of you who are coming back for the third round or the second round, that's wonderful. I'm glad to see you. So if you possibly can turn on your cameras, that would be great. I feel a little bit lonely here without cameras on, but we know that if you're not wanting to put your camera on, we get it also. Okay, we totally understand. Thank you, Dennis. Good to see you. So what I want to do today is I'm going to share my screen with you. We're going to go through some really good content. I actually love this topic. It's one of those topics that is near and dear to my heart. And partially because I spend majority of my time doing leader development. And when I talk about developing talent, I get really, really excited. You know, we do leader development programs at least once a day, sometimes twice. And so it's good to be able to share some of the practical things that, you know, we think you should kind of consider in your own organizations as you're evolving and going through things. And as we're in this really kind of weird space right now with respect to talent, it's a good time to kind of just go through some of this, try to figure out the best ways to, you know, retain people, etc. Okay, so let me share my screen with you. So you can let me know when you see the actual slideshow. Good. Okay, perfect. All right, super. Okay, so we actually started off our series with building organizational culture and engaged and productive teams. And then we took a deep dive on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're just closing out this series today by really focusing on attracting, developing, and retaining talent. And so it was kind of an all-encompassing series that I'm hoping you've been able to participate in. But if you haven't, I think the recordings might be available, right, Sandra? Yeah, okay, so the recordings are available for you. So today, again, this is kind of going to be our focus point. You know, attracting and developing and retaining talent can be hard right at this moment. And just finding out some tips and strategies on how to do that is going to be really key to kind of ensuring that you know exactly what to be doing in your own organizations. All right, so Dennis just had a question, where can we access previous recordings? So maybe Sandra can just send a note through the chat that will allow you to gain some access to those. So just to start off, some welcomes. Danton from my team may be joining in the next little bit. I know he's just caught up with one other client right now, and then hopefully he will join us. If not, it just means he's taken longer with that client. So, and Sandra already gave you a good intro of myself. So in order to introduce yourselves to us, what I want you to do is name, role, organization. And then I want you to share with us what is one reason why you or others stay working in your organization. And it could be something that you commonly hear, or it's buzz on the street, or you've heard from previous individuals, or people are saying, I was contemplating leaving, but decided to stay for this reason. All right, so who wants to go first?
I can start.
Okay, thanks, Brooke.
So hi everyone, my name is Brooke. I work for KTI Limited here in Aurora. And one of the reasons I stay as well as the buzz around the office is the company culture. Trish can probably attest to this as well. We're a family owned business. So we're all very tight knit and we keep those values consistent throughout our work. And a lot of buzz I've also been hearing lately is it's close to home for a lot of people, which I think is really important. So, not having to go downtown, Mississauga, that commute, hour and a half, whatnot, every single day really takes a toll on people. So that's just another point I had. Did you want me to pick someone else?
Yeah, you know the drill. Good for you.
All right, perfect. Okay, I guess I'll pass it on to my partner, Trish, then.
Thanks, Brooke. My name is Trisha Drew. I'm the Human Resources Manager here in Aurora at KTI Limited. And I would definitely agree with Brooke. In fact, I wrote it down before she said it. The culture here is it's amazing. It's very family oriented and extremely friendly around here. And it's just a really nice place to work. I will pass it on to Shauna.
Thank you. So I'm Shauna. I'm the Member Relations Ambassador here at the Aurora Chamber of Commerce. And what I love about my job is that I actually believe in what the Chamber does, what it provides. I see value in it. I love working with our business community to help them promote themselves and watch them grow. I love making those relationships and the connection that the Chamber provides. Also, it's local, it's close to home. So I appreciate that as well. And I'm gonna go to Sandra Watson.
Thanks, Shauna. And I'll echo what you say. Well, first of all, I'm Sandra Watson, and I'm the events manager here at the Aurora Chamber. And we're a small group. There's 3 of us here at the Chamber, and we're a pretty dynamic team. It's pretty amazing what we have, what we can accomplish. I think we do the work of probably 8 or 9 people. And I love working with the other 2 ladies that I come to work with every day. It's nice and close to home for me. And as an events person, I just love, I love organizing the variety of events that the Chamber puts on. So anything from, networking breakfast to series like this, the home show, the street festival, it's just a wide variety of events, and every day is different, and quite enjoying it. So that's why I stay. And I will turn it over to Dennis.
Well, thank you, Sandra. So I kind of feel like the fish out of water here because I'm not a private or local business owner. My name's Dennis Hain. I'm actually the NDP candidate for Newmarket Aurora in the upcoming provincial election. And I've been I saw this opportunity, this lunchtime series, and thought I'd kind of phone in to see get some better understanding and context of small and local business here in Aurora. I know that I've been trying to reach out to the Newmarket and Aurora Chamber of Commerce, and because my background is in public health, in public service, I feel like there are similarities yet very important differences with regards to how business runs. So that's why I am here. And I think the big thing for me is, why do I stay with my organization? Really, it's like, it is for the people and the culture, like people have said, but also for me personally, it's, I hate to say it, but it's for the money and the idea of a living wage, right? And trying to help people out, yet at the same time be able to pay my bills. And how do we work together with that? Because I feel like small business, local business is definitely a pillar of a thriving community in Aurora, and anything that can be done to help support that, I think, should be one of the top priorities.
So Dennis, you get to pass the baton to somebody else in the room.
Who has not? So I apologize, but perhaps Lupe? Hopefully I did not butcher that name.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm Lupe Torres from the
Yes.
Aurora Early Learning Center. And the reason why we stay, I mean, I am the owner. However, it's a small location. It's a very needed group. And I will hope that my staff stay because it's a good place to be. And I do try my best to reach out and try to get as much resources as I can for my team and for myself too, because if they are okay, I am okay. So, and that's one of the reasons I'm reaching out, just to get some ideas. And okay, that's it. So
I get to select who's next. Do I think we've got 3 people left?
I'm not sure about Nick. Is that talk already?
No, that's good.
Hey everyone, this is Nick. Well, first of all, I'm not from Aurora. I'm not from HR. I'm a research and development manager, but I'm quite interested to see the HR perspective in terms of hiring the new client, how they are looking at a new person for hiring, which is going to be quite helpful once I'm hiring as actually a technical manager.
Nick, can you do me a favor? Can you go closer to your mic if you don't mind?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Still a little bit hard.
Give me a second. How about now?
A little bit better.
Oh, wow. This is the closest one I can get. I'm sorry.
Okay. Can you just reintroduce yourself? I'm not sure that everybody heard what you had to say, and I know it's good to hear everybody introduce themselves.
Sure. This is Nick. I'm a research and development manager. I'm not from Aurora. I'm not from HR. So I'm quite interested to see the HR perspective in terms of hiring or staying or try to keep people stay in an organization. That's going to be helpful for me once I'm hiring people as a I would say hiring manager.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't know who A. Redmond is, so maybe we'll have you go next,
Sure.
and then the person who's labeled computer will go last. How's that?
Hi there. I'm Amy Redmond, and I'm here from WLWP White LeBlanc Wealth Planners. So we have an office in Aurora. I am currently located in Nova Scotia. Our business has offices all across Canada. So I'm just here trying to kind of make a connection as a person that's outside of the community, just to see, what's motivating people in the area, what they're looking for, just to keep people. So we've had quite a bit of turnover with staff in our office. So just hoping to get some ideas, I think, like everyone else.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So the person who's labeled computer, if you could go last, and I'll rename you once you introduce yourself. If anyone is there. Okay, so hopefully they'll know how to unmute their line, and then they can introduce themselves after they've been able to do that. So we'll just kind of carry on. So today what I want to do is really focus on what are candidates seeking in their next employer. Things have changed significantly. They had started shifting before COVID hit. Since COVID hit, things look completely differently. We have clients now that are doing things that they never said they would do, that we have asked them to do, and that's really just to make sure that they're attracting the right talent and keeping the right talent. We're also going to talk about some strategies for interviewing, and we really think it's important, particularly on the evaluation side. It's not just about the interviewing side, it's really how do you evaluate people in the best way possible to choose the right candidate, not just from a legal standpoint, because from a legal standpoint, there's going to be implications if you don't hire correctly. And if you don't hire in a very objective and systematic way, but also just for best practice, there's a lot of key things that I'm going to share with you today. And then we're going to switch our focus and really talk about, okay, let's look at our current talent gaps, figure out how we assess talent on a regular basis. And I'm going to share with you a methodology that we use for talent assessment and succession, so that I think right now in particular, it's really important to have succession plans in place. A lot of our clients are scrambling when people are leaving. And so we are recommending, and a lot more work is being put in right now for the succession side, to make sure that if you do have somebody leave, because people are leaving organizations, how you then make sure that somebody's ready to take on that next role for that person who's leaving. We had a client a few years ago who literally called me in a panic and said, I just had a leadership team meeting and 5 of the 7 leaders are retiring in the next 2 months. I'm like, what? Like, okay, so here's what we need to do. And like, we got a plan in place really, really quickly, because I was really, really worried that they wouldn't have anybody who could fulfill the roles. They didn't know what they were going to do. So we did a good talent assessment and we placed people in those roles, prepped them for when those people were to leave, and it ended up working out really well. I don't want to have to run like that though. And I really say it's a proactive activity we need to have in place versus the reactive. A lot of the time succession ends up being a reactive, I'm going to say a reactive move, and we're trying to get clients thinking more on the proactive side. What can I do in advance to prepare for if somebody leaves, or if somebody gets sick, if somebody gets hurt, whatever it happens to be, have a plan in place in advance. And then we'll talk, kind of closing out our session today, how do you actually build talent inside your walls? I'm a firm believer of building talent, not buying talent. And so where you can build talent from the inside, we'll talk strategies and why we would even consider doing that. Okay, sound good? Yes. Okay, so I'm very informal for those of you that are joining for the first time. Brooke and Trish, you would know if you've got questions along the way, just ask. I don't need like formal hands up or anything like that. You can just unmute your line and you can just ask me at any point in time. Okay. All right. So let's talk about people's next employers and what kind of candidates are looking for. And so what we're finding right now is more and more candidates are saying, I want to work from home permanently. I do not want to go back into a physical workplace. Do not ask me to go back into a physical workplace. And so where we're finding clients struggling is where they're saying, no, we will not have a work from home option. And it will be back in the office 5 days a week, no options. And so I've put hybrid model intentionally as a second bullet here, because where we know people are asking for a permanent work from home situation, if the organization doesn't feel comfortable with that, we're saying at a minimum, give a hybrid approach. So if you, depending on your size of your location, sometimes clients are now saying, I can't have everybody back in the same physical location, Jody, because of physical distancing. And I want to make sure we're still maintaining physical distancing. And I said, okay, then rotate. So rotate your schedules. And so, you know, you may have, you know, the organization broken out into 2 cohorts, and you may have cohort 1 working Monday, Wednesday, Friday, week 1, and Tuesday, Thursday, week 2. And then you're just going on this constant rotation within the organization. We have others that are saying, we got plenty of space, but we're going to be working from home Monday and Friday, and we're going to be in office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's the more common one that we're seeing, where people can have everybody in the office at the same time, because they're doing good collaborative work then during the times when they are in the office. The work from home permanently one, I have one client right now who's actually recommending to the board of directors they close their physical location, and that's only one of them. The rest of them are all assuming a hybrid approach. There is nobody who is doing permanent work from home except for that one. So it just shows you that kind of the trend is more hybrid approach. Even though people are requesting permanent work from home, most organizations are not doing that. Okay, so just to kind of give you some context. So if you have candidates that are saying, I need to work from home, I don't want a hybrid approach, and you're thinking in your mind, but we really want a hybrid approach just to get people working, collaborating together, majority of organizations are choosing that model. Okay, so you're not alone if you decide to choose a hybrid model. And so you wouldn't be outside of the norm. You would be going above and beyond if you chose everybody working from home. But then you've got to have some really good performance management tools in place, productivity tools to make sure that everybody's working up to the expectations of you know, what your organization needs. Candidates are also seeking a lot more flexibility. And so even with hybrid models, people are still asking for flexibility within that model. So if on a Tuesday I can't be in the office, for example, can I come in on a Monday instead? People are asking for huge amounts of flexibility, not just in their day, but in their weeks, in their hours. Like there's just so many requests right now that are coming to our clients where flexibility is one that is really taking this, it's kind of taking over in terms of how much flexibility people are asking for. People are also asking to work less hours. And so it's really beneficial to our nonprofit clients that are generally working in and around 35 hours. It's our for-profit clients that are already working 40 plus hours a week. And people are saying, I want less hours. I don't want to be working. I don't want to be called in on weekends. I don't want to be working overtime. So we're finding people are asking to work less hours. They also want lower levels of stress. And so sometimes that comes with less work hours, greater flexibility, etc. But they are saying, I can't handle the stress right now. I need lower stress. I need a role that's less. I need a role that's modified. I need more accommodation. So we're seeing accommodation requests more than we ever have because candidates are seeking it.
Okay. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
It just stopped me there. What if in your business model, like in our case, we're very client focused, so we have clients coming into the office. What if a work from home model just isn't feasible? What, like, are there any other alternatives that people are seeking or?
We have insurance clients right now, so very similar. We've got insurance clients that are hybrid and it's working for them. So we have financial services clients that it's working for them from a hybrid perspective. So what they do is they schedule their in-person meetings on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they schedule, if they have to schedule Zoom calls, they will on a Monday, Friday. But we're finding that they're finding ways to make it work. Another thing that you could look at potentially, I just posed this to a client the other day, is do a compressed work week for people. So have people work 4 days a week, but they're working compressed hours. So if they are, they may work 10 hours a day instead of the, the lower amount, and they're spanning it over 5 days. 4 days a week. So that may also be an option for you because you do have, if you have a requirement to be in the office, a compressed work week may work for you.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, it just offers the flexibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, we're trying to come up with unique ways to make it work right now. And, these may be permanent solutions that we end up having in place. We used to do compressed work weeks years and years ago. And now it's starting to come back because we're trying to find alternatives to creating greater flexibility for people.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. People are also looking for greater pay. And so you probably have seen, some of you have probably seen with the pandemic, people have dug their heels in to say, I'm not going back to work unless you're paying me more. There's no way. Or I'm not switching organizations unless I get a significant amount of pay. We are finding that rates are increasing significantly. Like we have frontline clients that are servicing the community, and people are asking for $3 more an hour right now. And it's because they're getting it elsewhere. And it's a real steep competition right now to match some of those rates when these clients are struggling already and just trying to figure out how to get talent in the door. The greater pay component is a huge concern, and clients are just trying to figure it out. And one of the things I go to first is, okay, streamline your process. So get your process in check, because then you'll really know what your staffing model needs to look like. If your process is not good and you're doing, you have, laborious processes that are inhibiting the team from working successfully, if you streamline your process, you may be able to not have to hire people because you are streamlining things. So it's making really good use out of your talent versus just saying, okay, we need to increase pay amounts to X. I'd rather increase the pay of the people we have, streamline process along the way so people are working in a more streamlined fashion, and then rewarding those people who are already there. So that's one way to kind of look at things. People are also looking for opportunities to develop. And so the interesting thing is, if you look at the newer generations entering the workforce, they're generally going to stay between 1.7 and 1.9 years. That's it. And so they're looking for these opportunities to develop themselves. And so I talk about this key part in tenure being 1.5 years. And at the 1.5 year mark, if we are not looking at that talent and saying, where else can we move them, or can we develop them further? Can we give them stretch opportunities? Can we give them secondments? Can we do something different with them? They're going to walk out the door. And so those opportunities to develop are really important, but also the ability to be challenged throughout this time. Okay, so really interesting work, great opportunities to thrive, not providing, mundane activities to people. Okay, people are still looking to be challenged. Okay, is that any questions on that? So in terms of strategies for interviewing, so if we talk about what candidates are looking for, there's this whole concept around how do we actually interview appropriately. How many of you, just by raise of hands or unmuting your line, how many of you have values that you hire to right now? You think about organizational values. Do you have values that you're hiring to?
We do.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And how many of you have behavioral competencies that you're hiring to? So you have a list of behavioral competencies and you say, these are the core behaviors that we want to see people exhibiting within our walls.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. So that's kind of your starting point. That to me is kind of point of entry right now in terms of strategies for interviewing, because in the absence of that, we don't necessarily know what we're asking. Okay. And so when we have a group of values that we're hiring towards, if we got behavioral competencies that we're hiring towards, then what you can do is strategically write your interview questions so that it's specifically targeting those values or those behaviors. That's going to gauge fit. That's going to gauge, is this person going to live and breathe the values that we have? What is the behavioral competency level of this individual? And then you assess the technical functional side. Okay, and so what we're finding more so, and we look at interview guides all the time for clients, is when we look at interview guides, a lot of them are not complex. And so we have to increase the complexity of the interviews that the interview questions that we're asking of candidates as well. Because what we're finding is people are hiring people, and then when we get to meet with them for the first time, we recognize there's a gap in skill. And so it's really because they haven't assessed the competency side, they haven't assessed the technical functional skills appropriately, and then we have to teach all of those skills. So it's harder for you to have to teach them once they're on board. I'd rather if you have to hire from the outside, that you're hiring to hire for those competencies, hire for those values, hire for those technical functional competencies or skills that you need. So let me just scroll forward. There we go. Okay. So again, I've already kind of spoken about this, but tapping into the values and the competencies is when you're creating your interview questions. Multi-interviews with various individuals also. So sometimes what we do is, because we're so concerned we're going to lose candidates right now, we just do one interview and we hire, that decision's made, check, and they go through onboarding, etc., and then they leave. Okay. What we're not doing is we're not actually doing due process for those individuals. And so what we have to do is kind of slow the process down. I say all the time to clients, I'm like, keep the person warm. If you're really, really interested, call them daily. Make sure that your presence is known to them. Move as quickly as you possibly can. Like we were hiring for a director of communications recently for a client, and we moved super fast. So Danson on the Enliven team, he moved really fast. I put together the interview guide. He did all the screening. He's the one that did all the contacts. He connected with the client to say, okay, here are our top candidates. Which ones do you want us to interview? They said, interview them all. So I think there were like 12 candidates. They said, interview them all. We then recommended a top 5 from there. And 2 days later, they were getting interviewed. So the process can move really quickly, but you have to have a really good process in place and go through those multi stages of interviews, because it's really only one person's perspective if you're only including one person in the process. I like to get perspective from other people when you're interviewing to make sure they're going to be a good fit. They're going to collaborate well, they're going to meet with their partners well, they're going to be able to, service the community. If you've got community servicing type of roles, they're going to service the community really well. Sometimes getting different perspective can actually help in solidifying the right candidate for your organizations. How many of you do that now? How many of you have multiple interviews?
For certain roles.
Okay. Like your entry level ones, Brooke, you don't?
Yeah, we have a lot of roles that are like, we have to hire large volumes of people. Like, so, interviewing every single one of those people multiple times would be a little bit too time consuming for the other individuals involved. But for more, I would say, quote unquote, corporate roles, we definitely do multiple interviews.
Yeah. So like the professional type roles.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So Jody, do you have any guidelines with, like, I hear the idea of you want to go slower, right? Because the cost of hiring the wrong individual is going to be like 10 times more than if you hire the right individual up front. But do you have any guidelines about how long or we should be expecting to have these interview processes go before we really risk losing our ideal candidate?
Yeah, and again, depending on, so let's hypothetically say you go through your first interview and you've got 5 top candidates, but there's somebody you're like, this person is a rock star, I don't want to lose this opportunity. Go forward with that person, and you can always hold back on the rest for a couple of days, but push that forward, because what you don't want to do is take a chance you're going to lose a good candidate. And that's why, like, move slowly enough that you're still going through your process. But if you need to speed up the process because you've got this star candidate you don't want to lose, push them forward quickly on it. Yeah. And we've done that with a few clients recently, where, we recognized that the person was really amazing and perfect for the role and really hard to find. And we kind of lucked out by having them apply for the role. We've pushed them forward in the process right away. And in some cases, we go through the interviews. We then say to the client, here's your 5 top candidates. You need to move fast on this. And they'll interview within a couple of days. But in the meantime, we're contacting the people daily to say, so what do you think of the first interview? Are you excited for the next one? Do you have any questions for us? Because what you want to do is create an experience. And that's part of this whole employer relationship, is how do you create this experience for somebody where you're contacting them, they feel like they're at home, they feel like they belong. A lot of the time what happens, and we see it all the time with clients, is they apply for a role, they don't necessarily hear back for a week, they then get contacted, the person doesn't remember because they're applying for a whole bunch of other jobs, they don't know what's what. You get them in for a first interview, you don't thank them for the interview, they don't thank you for the interview, you then call them 2 weeks later and hope that they're still available. We are very high touch when it comes to recruitment, and I say to clients, make sure that you're high touch on these things. Like if you've got a group of star candidates, you should be contacting them daily and making sure and checking in and allowing them to understand that you're taking their candidacy really seriously. So I'm hoping that kind of helps a little bit. And the last point I've put in here is just assess using a mixture of, and there's usually a few things that we recommend. So one is the behavior-based interview, which is, we talk about the best predictor of future behavior is looking at past behavior, but creating more complex questions when it comes to behavior-based interviewing. Like we see questions all the time. It's like, tell me about a time when you managed a project. It's like, that's kind of basic. So what do you want to really know about the person? Tell me about a time when you were managing a project and you had a stakeholder that was really challenging. That's a little bit of a better question. That's kind of a question I would want to be asked, because what you want to do is really understand how the person is going to handle a situation. Not just tell me about a time when you managed a project. Anybody could talk to that. The more complex you make them, particularly for the professional roles, I'm not saying like the ones that Brooke was talking about, those entry level ones, For the more professional type roles, make the questions more complex because you're going to wean out the people that are not going to be good for the role. Sometimes these easy Mickey Mouse questions are not going to work for you. You may not get a good feel for who your top candidates are coming out of it. You want to know who your rock stars are coming out of your interviews. And so the more complex the question is, as long as it's not so far-fetched where people are like, what? It's like, I don't understand what you're even saying to me right now. Add some complexity into the questions. It enriches the experience. It shows people you're taking it seriously and not just asking questions for the sake of asking questions. Okay. Like we're doing an HR review right now for a client. We're just looking at all their HR programs, all their services, what they're offering. And I looked at their interview guides and I said to the client, I'm like, your interview guides need some work. And they said, yeah, we know, they're pretty easy questions. I was like, okay, good. They know that they're really easy questions, which means most people will get through the interview. And then it makes your life more challenging because you're like, okay, how can I stand behind who I'm recommending when I now have 10 people that are fully qualified for the role based on the questions I'm asking? I'd rather you ask more complex questions and get 5. And you will, the more complex your questions are. And that's why we've put in here, ask scenario-based questions, right? And don't do hypotheticals. You know, it's like, choose a real problem that you've had in your organization. Like I know when I was interviewing for my team, I asked an interview question. It was pretty complex because I said, you get a call from a client at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and it was the client said that an employee had said in like lots of detail, what's your next move, right? And so I laid out all the details because I wanted to see, would somebody say, I think it can wait till Monday, right? Which we did have people say. It's like, oh, okay, so it doesn't sound that urgent. I think it could wait till Monday. And I'm like, when you're servicing clients and an urgent matter comes in where there's a harassment complaint, you're dealing with it right away. And so I only had a handful of people, 4 candidates, that said it must be dealt with in that day. Others were like, yeah, because it's a Friday, it's late, the people have probably gone home. Yeah, we would just wait till Monday. And I'm like, okay, not the right candidates for us, right? Because we're in the service industry. We need to service our clients. So, you know,
Jody, I think I've asked that exact question. I think I've used that exact scenario, and it does give you some great answers. You really learn about people on that one with that kind of detail, how they immediately react or not.
Yeah, and I just find, you know, again, we're trying to get the best candidates for our organizations, and we're trying to get the best of the best, those who can literally come in and start performing right away. You know, some of your organizations are probably running very lean right now. You need good qualified people coming in, not candidates that aren't going to push the envelope. And so, you know, Trish, I'm glad you're asking that level of detail because it does really wean out the people quickly. It really does. Like I even ask questions, and if you're ever hiring HR people, it's a great question to ask. It's, you know, if you were to talk to a client, and this is in the service industry again, if a client were to ask you to create an employee handbook for them, what would be the top 10 policies that you would want to include? And people are like, what? I'm like, like, let's hear it. I'm interested in what you have to say here. So they can be the more complex, again, the better off they are. And the scenario ones need to be super detailed, not just, you know, oh, you ran up against an obstacle, you know, with this particular person, what would you do? That's not complex enough.
Jody?
Yeah.
Is there ever a time where it's better just to walk away from the candidate pool? Or because it sounds like, especially in today's circumstances, that there are, I guess, potential hires are a bit more. They have a bit more options right now, right? And like, what type of circumstances would you describe where it's better to kind of say, you know what, instead of taking a warm body with a pulse to potentially do something with our organization, perhaps it's better just to step back, take the hit now, and look at kind of like some of our other processes about why we did not get a qualified candidate.
Yeah, we recently posted a role for a client where we act as their HR department, and we actually said to to the client, we said, can we actually change the title of the job? And they said, why? And I said, we don't have the right candidate pool. I'm like, the people who have applied, while they're good, they're not fantastic. And, you know, Danson had interviewed them. He was kind of about some of them. There's only one qualified candidate, but I wanted to compare them to others. And so we went to the client, we said, here are some optional titles that we think you could post. Can we repost the role using one of these? And our candidate pool increased significantly. So sometimes we do walk away. Sometimes those who are kind of, we think are good, we'll start them into the next round of interviews and just wait and see what the other candidates coming in look like, so that we're maintaining some level of, you know, movement on them. But with the others, we just tell them, you know, we've decided to repost the role. We've added some elements to the role at this time. You know, we're not going to be pursuing your candidacy. You know, in the future, if there's other roles that are posted with the organization, we hope you'll consider applying. Like, we kind of respond that way. Yeah. But sometimes the title that's internal, even though we say we know we're not going to get good candidates, you know, we were hiring a finance role for a client a few years ago. And it was interesting because they said, here's the title for the role. I'm like, I'm not sure it's going to get you the candidate pool you want. And they said, just let's post it and see what comes of it and everything. We ended up having to repost it and call it a finance technician role. And then we got all the candidates we needed. I'm like, who applies for a finance technician role? Like, we didn't even think about it.
So when you say changing the title of the role, is that just strictly the title, or does it also impact responsibilities and compensation and such? Or is it just really, yeah.
Sometimes it's just changing or altering the title for posting purposes so that you get a better candidate pool. Yeah, it's more indicative of what the role is actually going to do. And then in the body of the posting, we say the actual role's title is X, like we say what the role's title is internally.
Okay.
So we're very transparent about it, but we post the role using a different title to attract more talent to the role.
Okay.
Sometimes titles can be very misleading. Very misleading. So I'd rather get some really good titles that are going to attract the right talent pool. We're also increasingly having potential candidates do presentations or writing assignments. So we've had a lot of very heavy writing roles recently that require lots of attention to detail, knowing legislation backwards and forwards, knowing what's going on in the political environment, where it requires lots of finite attention to detail. And so we've asked for writing assignments. We give scenarios and we ask them to write a piece. You know, it's quite short. Like, we don't want them putting in hours and hours of work, because that would be unfair. But we are asking increasingly for people to do writing assignments or do presentations depending on the level. So here's a situation we're encountering right now. Put together a presentation on how you may combat it, give them some details. Like, for finance roles, for more senior finance roles, we may give them a financial statement and have them do a presentation on their interpretation of the financial statement, right? So complex, but it weans out the people that just are not going to be high enough on the scale for them to be a qualified candidate.
Complex, but I'd argue it sounds like it feeds straight into the core competencies of the role. That if you can't do the presentation and interpret a financial statement, it gets to your competencies. So no, makes sense to me. Thanks.
Yeah. And we work a lot in the nonprofit space. And so we want to know how people are going to present to board of directors. We want to know, can they carry themselves during challenging conversations? You know, can they, you know, if they have to speak to a minister, for example, can they do that? How are they going to carry themselves in that discussion? So we, you know, in that type of an environment, we always do presentation or writing assignments. And then testing. So Brooke and Trish, you may do some testing. I don't know if you do right now, but I have a feeling you may do something, or you have in the past.
We have done testing online through Indeed, where we, I think we've asked for English assessments, and there was something else, but at the moment I can't recall what that was.
Workplace safety assessments.
That was it. Thank you, Brooke.
Yeah. Yeah, The testing component is more for frontline, entry-level type of roles. So, even if you're testing Excel capabilities, et cetera, if you need somebody who can do pivot tables, test them on pivot tables. Don't just take their word for it that they know what they're doing, because we've tested lots of people for pivot tables and majority of them have no idea how to do them. It's like the odd one who says, yes, I can do it. And they can, versus, they say they can do it. When we put them to the task, they have no idea how to complete them. So it's a good way to just kind of wean out candidates. And now what we're doing is we're embedding them in between stage 1 and stage 2. So if we do phone screening, for example, we may test in between and then do their second round interview, so that we're not wasting our clients' time, but that we're testing in advance to make sure they can hit that technical functional competency before we ever put them in front of clients. So the client determines what the test is, we administer the test for them, and then they determine if the person's moving forward. So one way to get to wean down your candidate pool as well. Make sure that you're really tapping into the right people. Okay. The other thing I like to do is I really like to create the evaluation mechanism. And so this is solely when you are doing interviews. And, I've given you an example here just to kind of show you how we do it. So strategic thinking, for example, if we're trying to tap into strategic thinking, we would have this. So we would have the question at the top of the page. And then this is the evaluation matrix. So we would evaluate each candidate based on the level that they've achieved by answering the question. So they'd be a level 5 if they've talked about the concept of, maintaining relationships with stakeholders, really getting a clear sense of strategic direction, and making sure that strategic decisions, are communicated well, et cetera. So based on, a 5-point rating scale, we will rate the candidates based on this rating scale. And it works really well when you're in panel interviews. So if you have more than one person interviewing, you can compare your ratings after for a really objective way to assess your candidates. So it works really well. Probably not for your entry. You're not going to necessarily do it for your entry level roles, but I would say for professional and above, I would definitely consider doing something like this if you don't already. How many of you do evaluation mechanisms similar to what I've just shown you? Yeah, it's a little bit more complex. But again, it allows you to really determine what is the core competency that we're really looking for in our future candidates and our future team members, and really making sure that they are at least getting to the level that you want them to be at. Okay. All right, so let's kind of switch our focus now. Just want to make sure there's no questions here. Okay. All right, good. Dennis, I was just reading your note. Sounds like the time and effort you put into preparing your interview process will be paid in spades based on the better understanding of strengths and fit of the potential hires. Exactly. And that's where, clients say, the upfront effort is worth it because we're asking the right questions. We're adding the level of complexity we need. We're making sure that our scenarios are accurate and that they're an accurate representation of what we're currently going through. So it can work really, really well. All right, so let's kind of layer on a concept now, which is the whole concept of talent assessment and gaps. And this is not on candidates now, this is about internal team members. And so I kind of like looking at it from a very holistic standpoint. And when we look at things from a holistic standpoint, I always think about, in order for us to fully understand gaps, and be able to plan for it, we have to be really systematic. And so it's one thing to identify the talent gaps. It's another thing to put a plan into place afterwards. And a lot of the component that's missing is the plan afterwards. So if we talk about succession planning, for example, this is kind of the standard practice that we would use. So we go through talent identification, which is, objective-based assessments, which I'm going to share some thoughts with you on that in a second. We then have discussions about talent, because what we want to do is we want to know, okay, who is our talent base? Who are those future successors? And then we figure out, okay, now that we can identify what roles we need to have successors for, so this is all on the succession planning side, you know, it's not just emergency successors. How many of you have emergency successors for roles?
Sorry, Jody, can you define an emergency successor?
Yeah, so an emergency successor would be if somebody got into an accident tomorrow, do you have somebody that can fill that role right away for whatever period of time? So those are emergency successors.
Thank you.
No, yeah, no problem. So a lot of organizations don't even have that. Okay, so it was funny because I was talking to Danson yesterday, and I said, you know, if anything ever happened to me, I want you to have this resource available. And he's like, "Can you stop talking right now?" And I said, "Why?" And I said, it could happen. You never know." He's like, "I need you to stop talking because nothing's ever going to happen to you." And I said, "Okay, but if it did," he's like, "Jody, seriously, you need to stop talking." But it's really being planful about, one, who are your emergency successors, okay? But two, who are your successors that if something happened, let's say you decided to have, you know, we've got one client right now that we're going through succession planning with because they know in the next 3 years, they're gonna have 10 people retire. We already know. Smaller organization, we have to have a plan in place, which includes potentially looking at talent from the outside who could fill some of those roles, because it's a very niche market. Okay, and so we may need to identify talent from the outside that could be qualified to come in as part of their succession planning. For those of you that don't have emergency successors, it's super important for business continuity purposes. And we did a business continuity plan for one client early on in COVID. And we basically said to the client, look, like, you need to have something in place if people start getting sick. And they put together a huge business continuity plan so that anybody could pick up that plan and get work done. And it was because they service the community and they service a very, very large portion of the community. And we really needed to make sure that business would continue if people started getting sick. And people did. And people just picked up the plan and started running with things. And it's because they had that much level of detail. I think their business continuity plan was, when we were all said and done, about 150 pages, because they have different program offerings and they needed to know how to run the different programs. So that's part of what you kind of got to look at when you're thinking about the whole concept of succession. What does it look like? What is the need that you're trying to resolve for in that particular instance? Okay, so once you've kind of gone through the whole concept of succession planning, then you're going to realize, okay, who are our high potential talent coming out of it? And then I always say you've got to accelerate people's development then, because you have to prepare people for what happens if this person goes out. You have to have experiences behind you that you're going to be able to do the work. Okay, and so we accelerate people's development for those people that have been identified as successors, so that if something happens, they can take over right away and they can just start running with things, and you've got this seamless as you can activity that takes place. Okay, and then in larger organizations, sometimes we start moving talent around. So for those of you that are smaller, it's harder to do it. But in larger organizations, we tend to move talent around so that we're starting to create breadth of experiences in people, so that, you know, if they, I'll draw something out quickly. Hold on. I'm going to do a new share. Hold on. And tell me if you see a whiteboard. Everyone see a whiteboard now? Yeah. Okay, super. Yeah. So if you think about the whole concept of the ladder, right? Corporate ladder, people go from role to role to role to role. So they move this way. Okay. What we actually suggest is, if you want to have a really good succession plan in place, what you want is people to have breadth of experiences, not just depth. This creates depth of experience because people go up the corporate ladder or up, you know, your organization's chain. What we actually suggest is to create lattice type movements instead. So let's say somebody is here in the organization right now, and we want them to gain some experience in another area of the organization. We may temporarily move them here so that we can move them back in a higher level role. But what they're getting is more breadth of experience, so across the board here, versus just the depth of experience, which is all the way over here. So you know, there are ways to do it in smaller organizations. A lot of it is done in smaller organizations. We just rotate roles for people so that everybody gets a good understanding of each other's roles, so that if something does happen, the pieces get picked up pretty quickly. So hopefully that, does anybody do lattice movements right now?
I wouldn't say we exactly do lattice movements, but we do try to get people to work with other departments and inquire and learn about other departments and those jobs, and really get to understand what other people are doing within the company.
Yeah. And it's good because if anything ever happened, at least they would know how to pick up some of the pieces. Hopefully, that's what we hope for.
Jody, I have another question. So I've heard kind of both sides of the coin here. I've heard companies going, we have succession plans, but don't tell the people. We wanted to keep it a secret, not a secret, but you know, until the time comes. And then I have the flip side going, oh, tell them, but we don't want to get them too excited. What do you feel about that? I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a jumbled question there.
Yeah, it's a good question because we get that question all the time. Should we or shouldn't we? And if you look at, I don't think I included it in this deck. Let me just double check. Hold on 1 second. So this would kind of give you, an understanding of like what our succession methodology looks like. See here, let me just annotate this for a second. See how we've included this critical experience assessment. So the critical experience assessment is, you would have to tell people that they have been selected as potential successors for future roles, because the critical experience assessment is, what is it going to take for that person to be successful at the next level? So it's looking at, let's say you have a senior manager of sales and marketing, for example. And what you would want is, let's say you have people below that role, you would want to identify what are the critical experiences that are required for that senior manager of sales and marketing. What are those critical experiences? And then fill the gap for these individuals who have been identified as potential successors by providing them those critical experiences, so that if anything ever happened to this person over here, you know, 1 or 2 people could just naturally move in. And it's more seamless then. And there's some, unfortunately, there's scary facts out there, and I'll go through it now. I do mention it a little bit later, but when we start talking about leader development, for example, and when I talk about accelerated development, a lot of it ends up being leader development because you're moving people from individual contributor roles into leader roles. What we actually find is, without formalized leader development training, people are only successful 27 to 29% of the time when they move from individual contributor to leader. And so what we hope is that through accelerated leader development and critical experience assessments, and then closing the gap that way, that we're actually making people more successful by ensuring that their development is appropriate. Because we've seen people who get thrown into roles all the time, and they're like, I don't even know how to lead others. I have a client who we're working with right now where we're doing a leader development program for them. And I've had one of the leaders reach out to me and they just said, can I chat with you about something? I said, yeah, sure. And they said, I hate being a leader. It's not my jam. I don't love it. I am a really good individual contributor. Jody, what am I going to do? And I said, have you talked to your HR team? And they said, well, I talked to my leader, and my leader said the only way for me to move up in the organization is to move into leader roles. And that's going to be my future moving forward. And I said, okay, so have you talked to HR about it? And so I did. I encouraged them to go and chat with HR. I know their HR team really, really well. And I said, go and talk to so-and-so. They're going to be able to be a good ear for you. I've known them for years. Go and have that discussion. And I'm waiting to hear back from her to see how that conversation goes. But some people just, they don't know what they're getting into, and they're put into these roles. They feel ill-equipped. They're not really ready. And so you'll know that through these types of assessments. So the succession assessments that I'm referring to in this slide here, the critical experience one I think is really important, particularly again, because, so Brooke's question was relating to, should we actually communicate it? If you look at any type of ideal succession model or talent management model, you would see that transparent talent management practices would be at the highest level of achievement, which means that you're actively telling people. You're not keeping it quiet. A level like 1 is where you're quiet about things. So if you really want progressive talent management practices, you are conveying your up and comers. You are conveying that these are the people who, who you're addressing. And I've run high potential development programs. Like I ran Walmart's high potential development program internationally. People knew who were chosen because they would get announced broadly in all team meetings. So we would have a weekly meeting at Walmart, and it was a WHAM meeting. I don't know if anybody knows that. If anybody's ever worked at Walmart, you would know WHAM meetings were associate meetings where you have 1,800 people together in a room. That was pre-COVID. And basically the whole program, anybody who was chosen for the program would be announced during that meeting. And so people would come to me after. I should have had, like, those meat numbers when you go to the butcher shop or something, or when you're going to get service, that you pick a number. I would have a lineup by my desk after with people who didn't get into the program asking how they could get into the program. So it created a little bit of hype around it because it was a high potential development program, because it was for up and coming leaders. People were aspiring to be designated for that program. They got to go to Harvard Business School for courses. There was coaching that was provided by me throughout the program. So people got really excited about it. That's transparency at its best. So Brooke, my feeling is you should be transparent about it, because I do think that it creates, I'm going to say, a fire in other people's bellies as well. And I'm saying fire in your belly intentionally, because I do believe it sparks some passion in people to aspire to do more. So hopefully that helps you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no problem. I know, long-winded answer to a very short question, but I just think it's one of those things that I think is just really critical. So when we talk about succession, there's a series of assessments that should be done in order to make sure you've done succession really well. And if you're planning on doing succession planning, even if you're just doing emergency successors, this should be something you should consider. So looking at talent identification assessments, I'm going to review that with you in a second. Looking at people's strengths and opportunities, that will help assess some gaps for you. Doing a critical experience assessment on the role you're looking at filling down the road. Succession assessment is actually when you're looking at who are the people coming out of the talent assessment, okay? So who are people coming out of that talent assessment? What does their succession assessment look like? So who are those people who you're identifying as potential successors? And then their readiness. So how ready are they? So you have ready now would be like an RN, an R1 would be ready a year from now, an R2 would be ready 2 years from now. So the good thing is, what you can do is you may have people who are ready now. You may have people that may be ready a year from now with proper, accelerated development, et cetera. If you've got only people who are ready 3 to 4 years from now, you got to work a little bit faster, because if you've got a problem, particularly if they haven't experienced certain things, in their careers yet, it's going to be something they need to get under their belts fairly quickly. Okay. And then the risk assessment is, how risky is it for that person to leave? Okay, so the person you've identified as the successor, how risky is it for them to leave? Does anybody go through this methodology right now? Okay.
To a point we do. I wouldn't say we have a formal
Process
methodology for it.
Okay.
I think that I really buy into this, right? Because I feel like one of the first things that I was told in my career was that you never want to be irreplaceable, because the minute you're irreplaceable, you can't get promoted, right? And I'm always looking for the best things in my staff. One of the criticisms, one of the things that I feel like others have brought up for this is like, how scared should you be about people, you're training people for others, right? And I was wondering if you could please address that, Jody, because yeah, I feel like that's a comment that I sometimes get when I'm thinking about succession planning.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So I have a philosophy in life, and I've had this philosophy for a long time, is I've always wanted somebody to want my job. And regardless of what role I've been in, and when I train leaders, I always say to leaders, I want you to think that you want somebody to want your job, because if somebody wants your job, then you're doing the type of work you should be doing. And you can delegate tasks, you can coach better, you can have people buy into the opportunity of moving in. What you hope for is that people can keep moving up. But if you don't want somebody who wants your job, then you're just protective and you're kind of staying status quo. So if we can get people who are open to, I want somebody to want my job, they'll actually be more effective long-term because they'll push themselves naturally. So that's my personal philosophy. So that's how I kind of get around some of that, is just through conversations with leaders versus them being protective. Sometimes, we'll say to people, okay, who are you recommending as your future successors? And they're like, why? I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere, Jody. Why would you want me to, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to replace me now? I'm like, okay, just relax. What happens if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? What happens if you get sick? What happens if you move up into a new role? Is your team below you going to be able to do the job? And they're like, well, no, of course not. I'm like, okay, that's what we're prepping for. We're prepping for you moving on. We're prepping for you doing better things in your career here. Usually that satisfies most people, most.
Okay.
Some not, some dig their heels in and they're like, yeah, so I don't have anybody. You'll never be able to find somebody who can do my job. I'm like, okay, so let's talk about the critical experiences that somebody needs to do your job. And then they're like, well, they need to know how to do everything. I'm like, okay, so let's talk practically speaking. Let's look at your job description and figure out, okay, so what are the elements here that wouldn't be natural to most people? And that's kind of how I start the conversation, where I just like trying to plant some seeds here to get them on board. Most of them, there's only ever been one person that's really dug their heels in and been like, I'm not playing on this. Like, I'm done. I'm not even going to engage in this conversation. So
no, yeah, makes sense. You're kind of putting the organization's health first, kind of sidestepping individuals. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you.
Yeah. And in that particular case, when the person was not willing, I went to their leader. I'm like, okay, this person's not cooperating. Who are the potential successors for that person? They're like, this person, this person, this person, this person. I'm like, when are they ready? All of them are ready now. I'm like, okay, are you telling me what you want to do with this person? They're like, they need to leave. I'm like, okay. So, and it's usually the person who digs in their heels, they're not in the right role anyway, and they probably shouldn't be in the organization. Usually the people who are sophisticated enough to know that they should have a backup plan are the right people who you want in place, and the right people you want moving forward. So in terms of, so we talked about, I'm just going to go back here. So see on the very top, the talent identification assessments. I want to kind of walk you through the ones that we use. I find they're the most helpful. So some of you may know, how many of you know what a 9-box grid is? Anybody know? No, let me draw it for you. Hold on. Okay. Some of you would definitely know being in HR. Okay, let me draw out a 9-box grid for you just to give you some context. Okay. So when you think about a 9-box grid, a lot of organizations will assess talent based on this 9-box grid here. So what they do is they do results over on this side. Oops. Okay, I'm using my mouse, so I apologize. I should have used the text function. So this is low, medium, and high. Okay, so talking about performance. And then over down on the bottom here is the whole concept of what is called potential, which is how much potential does somebody have in them to move up in the organization. And again, you're looking at a low, a medium, and a high rating here. So obviously most people would want somebody identified in this quadrant: high results, high potential. And when people use 9-box grids, they're assessing talent based on that. So they say, okay, where do people sit on this 9-box grid? And they basically place the organization in one of these 9 categories. Okay, we have a client that has a 24-box grid. I was like, okay, this is insanity. So I said, I actually say, do away with this whole concept of this 9-box grid, because what people do is they see it as an activity. They plot people on this chart and then they never do anything with it. And so why bother plotting people on a chart? Let's look instead of doing something really, really systematic. And so I'll share with you what we use. Let me go back to my normal share here. You can let me know when you see defining potential. Does everyone see that? Okay, so we actually look at how do you just define what potential is in somebody. And so we actually take 4 different elements. So we use the performance assessment, so the results side of somebody's, you know, how people are performing. And so we say, okay, so that's one data point that we're looking at. We generally look at performance reviews over a 3-year trend because some people have dips in performance over a period of time. So we want to look at a 3-year trend. We then look at what is their behavioral competency assessment telling us. Okay, so like when we do performance review programs for clients, we incorporate 2 concepts together. So we talk about the what, so what is somebody accomplishing? And then how are they accomplishing it? That's the behavioral competency side. And so we assess talent on both. And then when it comes down to succession planning, all they have to do is then focus on the last 2 assessments, which are the engagement assessment. So how engaged is somebody with the organization? How do they have this strong connection to the organization? And then their drive and capacity to grow. So how much trajectory do they have? How much growth do they have from where they're at right now? And so we look at all 4 elements together. Okay, so they all span 25% each. And here's what we end up with. So for the purpose of identifying who our high potential talent is, okay, we actually only end up with 3 categories. So it's very mathematical. It is very objective. When you use a 9 box that I just showed you, people are like, I feel like people like lick their finger. It's like, which way is the wind going this way? Okay, I'll put them in that quadrant there because there's no objective assessments associated with it. And so if you can find a way to do objective assessments, everybody's being scored or rated on the exact same elements. And that's why we do the 4 different assessments. We find it just adds some meatiness to your process that's really objective versus, again, just like the wind is blowing in this direction today, I'm going to put this person in quadrant number 3. Instead, if you look at all 4 of these assessments together, it equals 100% potential. And you get 3 different scoring, so 3 different columns. You get somebody who is high potential. You get somebody who's well suited in current role, so no issues whatsoever. And then you've got a talent who might be limited that may need to go on a performance improvement plan, okay, or may need to be exited eventually from the organization. Okay, so very simplistic. And then from your high potential talent, that's where you identify, okay, who are successors for these particular roles based on their talent identification. So coming out as high potential, those are the people who you then look at, you know, being potential successors for certain roles. Okay, so it sounds complex, but it's actually very, very simplistic. It's a very, very easy process to go through. Okay. And these things don't need to be overly complex. Like, I'm not a firm believer of complexity. Like, HR programs should be easy to administer, quick. They make sense for most people. They're extremely objective. If you can kind of do your talent assessment in this way, it just streamlines the rest of your succession work that you're going to be doing. Okay? And it allows you to identify the gaps. Like, I look at any of the data points that are coming out of these 4 assessments, you're going to recognize what gaps exist then within your team. And often what we'll do is when we do the behavioral competency assessments, we theme the data after. So we may say there's a general feeling that your leaders in your organization are not strong in this particular area. A lot of it unfortunately comes down to lack of coaching, lack of providing feedback. They don't know how to do it. So they need to build capability then in those areas. It allows you to identify those things. You wouldn't be able to identify them otherwise. If you didn't have objective assessments, you're just kind of pulling things out from the sky and hoping for the best. Does this make sense for everybody? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
And then you've got your definition here. Sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
Is this for individuals, or could this also be applied to a group setting?
So you would do these as individual assessments, and then so a leader would assess on the performance, the competency, the engagement, and the driving capacity to grow. And then you can combine the data for an entire team to see where the gaps exist.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where you see the power of the tool, because you're able to compare and contrast team members to see, okay, and even partner people together, because you may see, oh, so-and-so has extreme strength in this area. I'm going to partner this person with them to learn that skill set. And so you're able to do that when you're doing systematic assessments. You can tell I get excited about this sort of thing. So coming out of the talent assessment, again, you've got the definitions of your high potential, you're well suited, and you're limited. I can let you review that on your own. These are just the definitions that we tend to use. They just work for us for the purpose of the conversations that we have with our clients. All right, so let's kind of close out our session by talking about building talent inside your wall versus buying from the outside. So there's this whole concept, let me just go, there we go. Okay, so the concept between building versus buying talent. When we're building talent, we're really looking at defining the future more clearly, because we already know the players that are inside. We know what we want for the future. And now what you're doing is you're building the talent internally to go where you want to go futuristically. It also allows for that concept of continuity. So again, when you're looking at the whole concept of succession, you know, when you're building talent internally, you're looking at continuity in service, in values, in behaviors. When you hire from the outside, you don't necessarily know what you're getting. You hope for the best, but not necessarily. You may not know what you're getting. Like, we've worked with organizations that have had team members for 40+ years, and they live and breathe the organization. And when we give them an opportunity to move into a leader role, they are so excited for the opportunity, because now they can share their experiences with others. And it just happens to be, it's just this warm, inviting place. And that's why I really love to build talent, because you're now growing talent organically. And you're really thinking about, how can I retain the best of the best? How do I, you know, ensure that people feel like they can belong? By building talent internally, you're naturally allowing those things to happen. Okay, and so that's why there's the whole concept between buy and build. There may be times where you need to buy talent because you're not necessarily tapping into it in the current mix of talent. What I do recommend, though, and this is a totally different topic that I could spend hours talking about, which is strategic workforce planning. And when you're looking at strategic workforce planning, what you're doing is you're looking out into the future to say, what is going to be our service offering 5 years from now? Do we have that skill set internally right now? And if we don't, then let's build the talent now to be prepared for that future, versus having to buy it from the outside, which may cost you more money. Okay, and then again, values may not align, behaviors may not align. You may have a bad hire. You may, like, there's all of these things that end up happening. That's why I'm such a strong proponent of building talent. The other thing we tend to look at is pivotal and key talent. So we look at who are our subject matter experts right now. So if you're really interested in retaining talent, look at who your subject matter experts are, whose skill set is highly valued, who are the people who are outperforming others in a really significant way, both from a performance standpoint, but also from a competency standpoint. Those are the people who you want to be building. Okay, so you look at kind of succession planning, how the assessments net out. These are those individuals that you may want to be developing as well. Sorry, let me pre-populate this. Okay, good. So in terms of building talent, some of it we've already spoken about today, which is assess on the competency side. So if you're looking at building talent, because this is all about how do we go about building talent inside your walls, you've got to assess the competency level first. Okay, otherwise you're arbitrarily deciding what you think people need greater skill at. Assessing for competencies using behavioral statements is one of the best ways to identify what are the current gaps right now and how do we close those gaps. Like when we have clients, sometimes we have clients who call us and they'll say, can you just do, you know, like a general leader development program? I'm like, So what does general leader development look like? Because it's such a loaded question. Like just teach people how to be better leaders. I'm like, so it's a little bit more complicated than just teaching leaders how to be better leaders. And I say, do you have a competency assessment? Like, do you assess right now for people's competency level when they're leading others? And a lot of people don't have those in place right now, but it's a really valuable tool. So we give them a needs assessment, which is the last point here. We give them a leader needs assessment to complete, and then we can actually develop something that meets their needs. So it just goes through what are the core areas that they really want to be building their talent internally. But if you don't have a competency assessment, your next step for sure is going to be a needs assessment. You're going to need to have something in place that's going to assess for the current needs. Okay, which maybe you need to do a competency assessment as part of it. We also like the whole concept, and I don't know how many of you have this in place right now, but you can tell me once I chat about it, is looking at a development planning program. So that allows people to do some self-discovery so that you're really helping build talent internally, but also you know, how you build that talent and develop the talent inside your walls. People who feel like you're paying attention to their development and that you're offering them interesting and unique opportunities to assess themselves, they tend to stay longer. And so when you have a development planning program in place, and it's not just goal setting, it's about the front end work that you need to do when it comes to development planning, which is, where am I now? Where do I want to be in the future? What's the gap that exists? They work with their leaders to identify it, and then they put their action plan into place from there. Most development planning programs only focus on the goal setting. There's pre-work to be done there, and a lot of pre-work that needs to happen before people really do a good job on development planning and figuring out what their true calling is and really where they should be developing. And then I already talked a little bit about the fact that leaders are only successful in that very small percentage, right? 27 to 29% at that next level. It is a really scary stat for me, because with the absence of leader development, only 27 to 29% are successful. It's a little scary. So, you know, you want highly capable leaders in your organization. Needs assessments will help you to build the talent you want internally. It will also, the needs, like any kind of needs assessment, competency assessment, any type of work that you can do that will allow team members to identify where they are right now, where they want to be. That is probably the best way to identify how you're going to build talent. Okay, really make sure that people can do what they need to do and be really successful doing it. All right. So to close out our session today, just some key takeaways, and I tend to talk usually in threes. So one is to determine your employee value proposition. So what are you offering right now to your current team members? What are you going to be offering to future team members so that you're attracting the talent that you want and that you're tapping into what's happening right now across the globe, which is hybrid approach, unique ways of doing things. Even from a retention standpoint, what we've started to encourage is sporadic staying bonuses. So it's built into somebody's employment agreement. And if you want somebody staying for 2 years, for example, you trickle a little bit of a staying bonus at, you know, throughout that tenure with a bigger bonus on the back end, so that you're encouraging for them to stay longer. Obviously, it's based on performance and things like that, but we're finding that those staying bonuses are even helpful when you can't pay a higher wage. Okay, so let's say people are stuck and they're like, I can't pay anymore. Those staying bonuses can actually help you, and trickling them throughout that period of time can even be that much more effective. But it's all in your employee value proposition. What are you offering people right now? What is going to make your experience unique to others, where you're going to be able to attract talent to the organization? Okay. Next one, create opportunities for people to learn and develop within your walls. It's one of those things that I just think is so critical, or you're going to start losing people. So if you haven't already started losing people, you may. One way to tap into retention is to develop people and give them some unique opportunities to grow. And then just assess your team often and create plans for retaining those who are critical to the team. There may be people who aren't critical to your team and you're like, actually don't mind if they self-select out in the next little while. You may have people like that. We were just dealing with one client yesterday. We're like, please, we want them to self-select out. So it's, you know, looking at those individuals and making sure that you're really tapping into those you want to retain. So I always do a stop, start, and continue. So this is only for your own development. So leaving this session today, I just want you to think about what are you going to do differently based on what you learned. So one stop, one start, and one continue, because you already know it's working for you. Any questions coming out of today? I know it's a lot in a short period of time.
So
Okay, well,
thank you very much,
sorry, go ahead.
Jody. I really appreciate this. I guess the one thing I always struggle with is when I'm participating in these, it's crystal clear. Your presentation is absolutely amazing. Totally understand the theory. And then 10 minutes from now, I'm gonna go away and it's gonna be, oh, it's less clear, or it's like, how do we get from theory to action? And I guess, are there any other resources that the ACC membership can tap into to keep this fresh and to keep this going, so that it's not just a one-time learning opportunity, but we can actually start incorporating it into our business practices?
What I hope is that the deck has enough information that you can probably start running with some of the things on your own. I try to include as much as I can without giving away all of our proprietary stuff. I try to include as much as I can, so at least you can get the ball rolling. If you think about a competency assessment, okay, if you need to do a competency assessment, what can that look like for you? If you want to do succession planning, here's a methodology that may work for you. I'm hoping that it gives you a little bit of a head start. If you don't have competencies right now, that's probably your starting point. Like if you really want to look at what would be the stage, competencies to me tie into everything. It ties into recruitment, it ties into performance, it ties into succession. It's almost like I talk about competencies that they weave everything together. And when we do programs, we always say if you don't have that weaving point, that competency point to weave through, people find HR programs disjointed.
No, yeah, and thank you. And I appreciate seeing your contact information. I feel like the big thing for me is we need to be asking the right questions, because if we're asking the wrong questions, we're going to solve the wrong answer or provide the wrong solutions perfectly. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Jody.
My pleasure. Well, it was great to see everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. If you have questions, you can always reach out to me. But it was always a pleasure working with Aurora Chamber, and just glad that we had some repeat people come back. And so those of you that are new to the group today, thank you so much for coming.
I agree. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today. And it was a pleasure to have you deliver these sessions, Jody. We really appreciate it. You stay well.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay, you too.
Thank
Bye,
you very
everybody.
much.
Take care.
Thank
See
you.
you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.